Hey everyone, ever stared at a piece of ancient text and just thought, what on earth is going on here? Well, if there's one book in historical literature that literally makes people scratch their heads, it's the Book of Revelation. It is intense, it's highly mystical, and it is absolutely packed with wild, layered symbolism. Today we're zooming in on a really fascinating passage, Revelation chapter 14, verses 1 through 5. It's a text featuring a massive crowd, a mountain, people playing harps, and some seriously challenging language about purity. But rather than just guessing what it all means, we're going to explore how the early church fathers, honestly some of the most brilliant minds of late antiquity, decoded this intense imagery.
Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Here is our roadmap. First, we'll look at the Lamb on Mount Zion. Second, singing the new song. Third, who are the virgins? Fourth, purity beyond the flesh. And finally, a garden for all.
Section 1, the Lamb on Mount Zion. Revelation 14:1.
So, the vision kicks off with one of the most striking visual contrasts in the ancient world. The passage literally begins, "A lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000. Picture this, Christ, represented as a lamb, standing victoriously on a mountain. Now, some early commentators took this incredibly literally. A 3rd century bishop named Victorinus read this and thought, okay, this is a literal Mount Zion, and exactly 144,000 literal Jewish converts who are going to find faith at the very end of time. But as the church grew and scholars started digging deeper, they realized this imagery was practically begging to be read as a profound metaphor.
Let's talk about that massive number, 144,000. It kind of sounds like a strict seating capacity for heaven, right? Well, an English monk and scholar known as the Venerable Bede looked at this exact number and basically said, hold up, this is absolutely not a head count. Instead, he proposed this wild, mystical interpretation using esoteric math.
Check this out, it's actually brilliant. Bede uses this esoteric math to argue the number isn't literal at all, but rather represents an infinite, perfect church. In step 1, he says the mind and soul are represented by the number 3. Loving God with heart, soul, and mind. So 3 times 3 is 9. Then, in step 2, he looks at the body, which he argues consists of 4 qualities. 4 times 4 is 16. Finally, for step 3, you multiply the perfection of the soul, which is 9, by the perfection of the body, 16. And what do you get? 144. Multiply that by 1,000 to signify a vast multitude, and boom, 144,000. Bede's point here is huge. It's not a restriction or a cap. It's a mathematical symbol of a perfectly devoted, infinite multitude standing with the Lamb.
Moving right along to Section 2, Singing the New Song, a Divine Euphony.
So we jump to the second verse. The text describes a voice from heaven sounding like harpers playing on their harps. But early theologians like Andrew of Caesarea and Bede didn't actually think there was a literal string section up in the clouds. No way. They viewed these harps as a profound metaphor. To them, the strings of the harp represented strict spiritual discipline. When saints crucify their flesh, meaning they actively resist their everyday vices and lusts, they are essentially tuning their lives to God. The end result isn't literal music, but what they called a melodious euphony of united breath. It's just a beautiful way of saying that human harmony and moral discipline actually create the most beautiful music in the universe.
Okay, Section 3. Who are the virgins? Decoding the 144,000.
Now we arrive at the most perplexing part of the vision. We have to ask the obvious direct question. Who exactly are these 144,000 virgins? If we take this purely at face value, we hit a massive historical roadblock. Andrew of Caesarea explicitly pointed out that back in the ancient world, literal, lifelong physical virginity was incredibly rare. I mean, if this passage means only physical virgins get to follow the Lamb and sing the new song, then the vast majority of believers are totally out of luck. So the early church really had to wrestle with this text.
And this is where we see a brilliant shift in early Christian thought. Scholars like Fulgentius of Ruspe and Caesarius of Arles stepped in to totally redefine what this meant. They drew a sharp line between physical virginity, which is the literal abstention from the flesh, and what they coined spiritual virginity. Spiritual virginity is really about the collective church. It means holding on to a pure, uncorrupted faith. It means not polluting your mind with deceit or heretical ideas. Under this new definition, anyone who holds the true faith with a sincere heart is counted right among the virgins following the Lamb. It's a total game changer.
Which brings us to Section 4, purity beyond the flesh, heart over body.
Even with that broader definition of spiritual virginity, the early church still had a really strong monastic movement, so they had to carefully navigate elevating physically pure monks and nuns while also encouraging everyday flawed believers. Initially, heavyweights like Jerome and Augustine mapped out this sort of spiritual hierarchy to organize it all. At the very top were the virgins, whom they called the first fruits. They believed these individuals would have a sweeter, much closer vision of the Lamb in heaven. Just below them were the devoted widows, who lived out their remaining days in chastity. And finally, at the bottom, the continent in marriage, everyday married folks who remained faithful to one another. So it was basically an ordered ranking of spiritual merit based largely on bodily discipline.
But here is the crucial point. The Bishop Caesarius of Arles looked at this entire ranking system and completely subverted it. He argued that bodily virginity is entirely worthless without humility and a pure heart. He bluntly stated that a proud, gossiping virgin would literally be excluded from the heavenly bedchamber entirely. Meanwhile, a humble, chaste, married woman is spiritually far superior to a proud virgin. The physical act of virginity means absolutely nothing if your heart is corrupted by arrogance.
So, what happens if you've already messed up? Well, the text of Revelation says, of the 144,000, no lie was found in their mouth. Bede zeroes right in on the word found to introduce this deeply comforting theological concept. You see, the text doesn't say no lie was ever in their mouth. It says no lie was found when it actually counted. Bede explains that through the grace of baptism and sincere penance, the stains of past sins are totally washed away. You can literally have your spiritual virginity restored. You are absolutely not disqualified by your past.
Finally, Section 5, A Garden for All, Inclusive Grace. We've arrived at the emotional climax of our explainer. We really need to address the everyday married people and widows who might still be feeling left out by all this. Augustine of Hippo totally recognized this anxiety, and he delivered what I genuinely think is one of the most magnificent floral metaphors in all of ancient literature. He wrote, "That garden of the Lord's includes not only the roses of martyrs, but also the lilies of virgins. The roses are red with the blood of the martyrs, and the lilies are white with the purity of the virgins." So these are the spiritual elite, right? The absolute heroes of the faith.
But Augustine doesn't stop there. He continues, "And the ivy of married people and the violets of widows. There is absolutely no kind of human beings who need to despair of their vocation." Isn't that just incredible? This is the ultimate message of inclusive grace. Christ's garden isn't just some pristine greenhouse for perfect lilies. It has plenty of room for the creeping ivy of everyday married life and the quiet, resilient violets of widows. Christ suffered for everyone, and the 144,000 is a symbol vast enough to include every single believer who sincerely seeks to follow the Lamb.
We've seen how a text that initially seemed super exclusive and restrictive was actually decoded by the early church to reveal an expansive, mystical vision of a massive, perfectly harmonious community. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to consider. If true purity is ultimately about the humble, honest posture of your heart, rather than just a physical state or a literal head count, what kind of flower are you growing in the garden? Keep digging into these ancient texts, guys. There is so much more beneath the surface. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.